Hi guys, so I have a big problem with Boris Johnson. I consider him a charlatan, a crook, corrupt, many things. But worst of all is probably that he's a liar. Because at least if somebody was honest, you can hold them to some sort of account. Now, unfortunately, Boris Johnson is capable of lying in the media, but in particular in Parliament, and he's not held to account. He's not held to account for two reasons. One being the opposition are incapable because he has an 80-seat majority. And the second is that Parliament itself, the structure of Parliament, doesn't allow itself to hold him to account. The Speaker of the House cannot intervene and say, Boris Johnson, you're telling a lie. Would you like to tell the truth for a change? That's not possible. And you're going to hear from Bim Afolami, who's a Tory MP, who's going to defend Boris Johnson's lying, suggesting that, don't worry, even if he lies, it's corrected later on, which it's not. So let's hear him defend Boris Johnson.
Right, and I want to point, Bim, to one or two of the examples that this letter that has been signed by the signatories of these opposition parties, one of them is around the Prime Minister making inaccurate comments in the Commons. They recall Boris Johnson saying the economy had grown by 73% under the Conservatives, which wasn't true. The economy grew 73% between 1990 and 2017. Which includes, of course, as you all know, 13 years with Labour in power. Should he be more careful and make a much greater effort to be accurate?
Now, before we hear the response, it's okay if Boris Johnson makes a mistake. I'm not going to hold him to an unreasonable standard. But when a politician makes a mistake in Parliament, they're obliged to return to the House of Commons and correct the record. But Boris Johnson does not do that. So he either is indifferent to his errors, or he deliberately wants them pushed into the mainstream so that people believe them.
Well, look, I think that some of those things, it sort of depends exactly what the words we use at any particular point. But
It depends on the words we're actually using. There's a nuance here, you know. Boris Johnson was talking about 74%. That was over 30 years, or almost 30 years, I think, when it was 2019. It was not during the Conservative reign. It included time when Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were in charge. You can't dismiss that. You can't dismiss that as, well, you know, it depends on what way you look at it. No, it's a factual error.
I do know that if the Prime Minister said something that's factually inaccurate, then the ministers report to the House and they correct the record.
No, they do not. Stop lying. We have a lie within a lie. It's almost like the movie Inception. Sorry, spoilers. You have somebody here lying about how Boris Johnson lies. Boris Johnson lies and he does not correct the record. Boris Johnson lies and ministers that follow on from him do not correct the record. Because if they were correcting the record, they would actually declare that. They would say this is the correction of what Boris Johnson said on this date or whatever. But they don't do that. Now, I haven't seen them do it. Maybe they do it if somebody can find an example of that. But Boris Johnson never does it. You know, he could take some time out from painting buses and return to Parliament and say, look, I'm sorry, on Wednesday, the 17th of March, I said X, that was wrong. I'm here to correct it. But he doesn't. Why does he not do that?
Some of the things in that letter were just transparently trying to make trouble. You've got an accusation that a grant of £5,000 for nurses isn't restoring the nurses' bursary. Well, it appears to be, £5,000 grant.
Right. Well, hang on, Bim. Hang on, Bim. Let me give you another example. And actually, did Boris Johnson correct the record there on that example that I read? I don't.
He didn't. Of course he didn't, because he doesn't care. He tells lies, hoping that the public will hear what he's saying, and it will stick in their mind. After, if he had to go back and correct it. Look, if he was clever, he would go back and correct it, and then he would tell another lie and go back and correct it. and tell another lie and go back and correct it. But he doesn't even do that. He doesn't care. He has complete and utter contempt for Parliament because he knows he'll get away with it. The Speaker of the House is not going to call him out, and the opposition have no power over him. You know, if Boris Johnson was in a minority government, I think he would probably act a bit more honestly. Not because it's part of his character, but because he would be obliged to do that, because he would be under pressure. He's under zero pressure. He does not care.
Don't remember it. Another claim they cite is Boris Johnson falsely claiming the number of families living in poverty have been cut by 400,000 since 2010. BBC Reality Check looked into this, and Boris Johnson made the claim repeatedly, especially during the 2019 general election. And they couldn't find any evidence that it was true or where the number came from. And they asked Downing Street for the source of the figure, and they didn't supply it.
The reason they didn't supply it is because it was probably a number invented by the likes of Dominic Cummings. You know, this is a huge number. Throw it out. It will stick in the public's mind. They will think you're doing a great job. And, you know, once we're called out on it, we just ignore the question. Because the media are not going to put pressure on us either. And even if they do, it'll be a story for a day. And then we can move on to telling another lie.
Well, look, I don't know. What I do know is that when it comes to poverty statistics, there's often a huge amount of debate because different organizations and different people use different assessments of poverty. So that may be the...
So if people are in poverty, it depends on, well, the statistics. You know, it depends on the definition of poverty. You know, the Tories care so much about the poor that they're going to say, well, you know, these people are in poverty and these people are not. We're just going to completely move the goalposts every time somebody defines what poverty is. And we'll say, well, these people are not in poverty because we've defined poverty as anyone, I don't know, anyone who earns less than £5,000 a year. See? Anyone who earns less than £5,000 a year is in poverty. And there are very few people in that situation. So look, poverty is going down.
Issue in relation to that particular stat. But the broader point is this. What's happening is that the opposition parties do not have a strong political argument.
So he pivots. Instead of actually defending Boris Johnson, well, of course he can't. He has realised, look, I can't defend Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is a compulsive liar. He doesn't actually return to Parliament to correct the record. So instead of actually trying to defend him, I'll just pivot to attacking the opposition. Yeah, I can't defend our actions, I can't defend our lies, so I'll just pivot to attacking the Labour Party, because that's easier.
They are trying to get into the minds of the public before local elections that somehow the government isn't being straight with what we're doing and how we're trying to achieve and deliver for communities up and down this country. They're not making a political argument, they're not saying what they would do better, and this just illustrates their weakness.
He's attacking the Labour Party for trying to get into the minds of people and say that the government are not being honest. This entire discussion was about how Boris Johnson is being dishonest, and you're complaining about the Labour Party highlighting the fact. It's a fact that Boris Johnson is lying. It's not some nuanced position. It's not something that we can debate. Boris Johnson is a liar. There's a list the length of my arm of all the things that Boris Johnson has lied about. We don't have to do a lot of research to find the lies of Boris Johnson. He tells a lie almost every time he's in Parliament. I'm actually surprised when Boris Johnson tells the truth. But this entire discussion was about Boris Johnson not returning to Parliament to correct the record. And he doesn't do it because he's not held to account by the opposition, and he's not held to account by Parliament. Something has to change. If the opposition can't do it, Parliament needs to be reformed. I truly hope that once the Tories are out, two things are put in place: proportional representation and a complete reform of the House of Commons. It's insane that a politician can lie in the House of Commons. If Boris Johnson was telling these lies in public, he would be held to account. There would be legal cases against him. but he can do it in the House of Commons. Please tell me why that's possible. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?